But not only that, he was the first African-American commissioner of any state police organization in the country. And the folks that he worked with, the ones that when he got assigned that position, that he picked to work with him, are in this room too. That goes to tell you something about the impact that that man had on people's lives. It was not just a glad hand politician kind of fella. At one time, he was the defendant in the consent decree that he was a part of. If you can imagine that. For those of you who don't know, the Pennsylvania State Police was under litigation in the early 70s for discrimination in hiring. When Colonel Sharp became Colonel Sharp, he was now named as the defendant, or one of the co-defendants. So it was, in a way, Sharp versus Sharp. The second reason we are all here, it came from three real important sources. One was the current colonel, the second African-American commissioner of the Pennsylvania State Police. Colonel Tyree Blocker. Now, not too long ago, the first of its kind, an award was given to a cadet at the Academy for graduation in the name of Colonel Ronald M. Sharp. That was his brainchild. He got to see that happen, and that sparked the desire to create a scholarship program at Westchester University for criminal justice major that would help continue that legacy that Ron had when it came to education and self-improvement, both not just in law enforcement, but in the criminal justice curriculum at large. I didn't even use my notes so far. I'm proud of me. Because I'm not looking again. The second reason why we are doing this is because all too often we don't gather together as retirees from the Pennsylvania State Police unless somebody has passed away or a close friend of ours has a wedding and we find our way there. To me, it's important to look around and see the history that's in this room. My only disappointment for this evening is that we don't have enough current troopers and corporals to witness those who made the doorway wide for others. I know Ron did that for me. I can point to Virginia for doing that for me, for Glenn for doing that for me. There's again, I'm not going to do everybody in the room, but the state police did one other wonderful thing in my life, and introduced me to that sweet lady back there in the white jacket. So while I have 25 years and change with the Pennsylvania State Police, I got 21 years of marital bliss with Stephanie Lewis back there. Yeah, buddy. But one of the reasons why are we honoring Ron? Just because he's the first black? No. We would have never had the Williams sisters had there not been an Althea Gibson. We'd have never had a Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan had there not been, man, I just lost his name. I'm old. It's all good. Anyway, you understand the point. Somebody opened up the door through which others could either widen that path or make that path straighter. Ron did that for a lot of the folks that are in this room. He wasn't the first African American in the Pennsylvania State Police, but his legacy has impacted a lot of us. Had it not been for him, and the Bernie Chapmans of the world, and the Art Williams of the world, and the Virginia Smiths, and the Hop Conleys, to broaden the entryway for others to follow, we would not have this time. So that's why we're here together, to make sure that we, one, honor his legacy, establish something that continues long after we're gone to help others become the professionals in law enforcement that they need to be. Does that sound like a good reason? Yeah. Okay. Now, my next duty is to call attention to some of our special guests. This time I've got to use my notes because I don't want to miss anybody. And then when I call your name, please just wave your hand. You don't have to stand up. Those who have been tagged to speak know who they are. They'll get up when it's their chance. But I'd like to start from the Pennsylvania State Police. Our active members, Colonel Tyree Blocker, who's the Commissioner of the Pennsylvania State Police. One of his Deputy Commissioners, Lieutenant Colonel Lisa Christie, Deputy Commissioner of Administration. And the guy you saw running around in the red tie and the dark suit with the bald head, that's Richard Nesbitt. He's a corporal, but he's the president of the Pennsylvania State Guardians. Now I'll open it up to some of the retired commissioned officers. Colonel Glenn Walt, one of the former commissioners of the Pennsylvania State Police. Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Blackburn. Lieutenant Colonel Hawthorne Conley. I still call him Hal. Major Virginia Smith. The best boss, but one of the best bosses I've ever had. I got to say one of the, because somebody else I work for is probably in the room. Major Benjamin Brooks. And one that is near and dear to me is Russell Clanigan, Captain Russell Clanigan. I gotta say why. If you ever go to those banquets and folks say, whoever came the furthest point should get some recognition, he's one of the ones that came from the furthest point. Texas? Arizona? Dallas? Arizona. Okay. And Captain Cheryl Hicks. And last from the Pennsylvania contingent, not an enlisted member, but one whose work was instrumental in getting a lot of us through the door, Harold I. Goodman. Now, I'd like to talk to acknowledge the National Organization of Retired State Troopers Incorporated, Lieutenant David Washington from the Maryland State Police, retired. From the New York State Police, Lieutenant Pamela Sharp, retired. Boyce Elliott, the senior investigator from the New York State Police. Now going to our neighbor to the east, New Jersey State Police, Captain Frank Davis. Captain Carla Thomas. Lieutenant Alan Miller, retired. And Sergeant Ryan Barclay. Now I want to thank the next group of folks for sharing your dad or husband with us. Because again, his thumbprint on the Pennsylvania State Police is indelible. You can't talk about it without remembering him. And that's Colonel Ron Sharp's family, Martin Sharp, Tracy Sharp, Jesse Sharp. Am I missing another Sharp? I had a blank that didn't know who was coming.
You forgot me like Dr. J.
Yeah, like Dr. J. And now moving out of law enforcement, but just as important to the history of the Pennsylvania State Police, the Honorable John White, Jr., former Secretary of Health. I was just chatting up his granddaughter out in the hallway to tell him that if it wasn't for him and Dave Richardson, I would have never met Harold. Had I never met Harold, I'd have never been on this job. And had I not been on this job, somebody else would be standing up here. I still would have found Stephanie. Yeah, buddy. Don't get it twisted. Okay, I'm sorry. Let me be official. Deb Cornelius, from the Westchester University Associate Director of Development. The Honorable Homer Floyd, former Director of the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission. The Honorable David Owens, former Secretary of Corrections. The Honorable Richard Barber, former Secretary of Transportation.
Couldn't make it.
Didn't make it. And I've got two others I need to say hi to. One is a dear friend, and there's another one that's going to be a dear friend in the future. I'll start with the dear friend in the future. Cynthia Link, the Superintendent of SEIC Graterford. And Margaret Moore, Margaret Hooker, Superintendent, retired, of State Correctional Institution in Smithsfield. Okay, that's all of my official duties. It's time for you guys to decide how hungry you are and whether you're going to knock anybody down to get to the buffet line. But I get to call some numbers first, okay? Yes, ma'am.
I think it would be best if we would go out this door and come in that door. And the buffet is this line out here. Unfortunately, it's buffet. So I had asked people for chicken or fish. And if you didn't ask for fish, then I appreciate it if you not hog it. Because I asked them to make more chicken.
Thank you. This works. You okay? All right. I appreciate it, Byron, for those kind words. And I say to you out here, good evening to friends, families, guests, and to specifically the soldiers of the law who were members of the Pennsylvania State Police and still are some who are members of the Pennsylvania State Police. When I got a call from Ben and asked me if I would be able to come in and give this presentation tonight, I was sort of taken back from the perspective I know Ben could have chosen so many other people who would do a fantastic job in this presentation, and I was very, very honored. I see Ron, I'm going to call him Ron at this point. Ron was a great friend. Yes, he was one of the greatest troopers, leaders, statesmen the Pennsylvania State Police has ever had, and I say will be one of those that the State Police will ever have. He was just a great friend, a great man, and it's just my honor to be here tonight to honor him, Ron Sharp, Colonel Ronald M. Sharp, for the great job that he did not only for the Pennsylvania State Police, but as indicated here with the idea of having the issue regarding the university and setting up that program for those minorities who may be interested in the criminal justice system and help them launch their life. But it's my great honor to be here tonight, and I thank you very much. I'll have to say, coming from the state of Arizona, my wife and I, when we got up this morning, went outside, I was wondering what made me so cold. And what's this wet stuff coming down out of the sky? Because you see very little rain out there, well, at least where we live. And I even had to turn on the windshield wipers. And first of all, I had to find out where that was in the car. The only thing you do with windshield wipers and the blades is about every year you have to change them because they're dry rotted. And that's true. That's true. Because you go to turn them on and they're all broken up, so you have to keep putting new windshield wipers on. But anyhow, it was our pleasure being here, but it's a little bit of a shock. Normally I don't come back east unless it's summer, unless there's some family emergency or something to that, but it's great being here, and it's great, I have to add, it's great being among friends. When I launched to the West, there were a lot of circumstances I wasn't always around friends, and sometimes there was some embattlements going on, but I always felt and really feel like thank you for making myself, as always, and my lovely wife Diana feeling so at home and so welcome here. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. When I left the state police after a year hiatus, I had multiple police jobs out west, moved out west. I do love the heat, and thought of a lot of different places I wanted to go, but I finally ended up in Arizona. And I worked for 2 municipalities. I worked for the Los Alamos National Lab in New Mexico, and also was the chief at the Capitol Police in the state of Arizona. And I would say that although I worked for a lot of good people, both male or women and men in law enforcement in the West, some outstanding people, but they weren't all outstanding. And from the perspective of the type of police departments, during the course of the time that I worked for these various agencies, I wrote personally nearly 80 different policies, operations manuals, because I felt they weren't in line the way professional law enforcement should work and should operate. And I would say this, and I know there's other state police organizations represented here tonight, and you're great organizations too, but for me, I guess I'm a little biased, but there's nothing like the Pennsylvania State Police. It just isn't. It just isn't. As the colonel here would tell you, when you're commissioner, every day's an adventure. It's like walking up to that car, you stop for speeding, you have no idea what's coming out of that door or what's going to happen, the window comes down, and it is as commissioner, every day you never know what's going to happen. And when you're in leadership, that's part of the process. But one time when I was commissioner, when Ron left, and I was so fortunate, and I would say this, that when I did come commissioner, I became commissioner because of the high support that I received from Colonel Ronald M. Sharp down at the Capitol, that he supported me and said, this is the man you want. And I owe that to Ron, and I appreciate that. But one day, we have the wiretap unit, and every now and then, which I didn't know, I became commissioner, but every now and then they go down to the Capitol and they check, see if anybody was wiretapping in the lines. You'd get those requests from senators, you'd get them from representatives, I see Joe smiling here, and he knows what's coming. And anyhow, they were down there doing some checking. They usually went over the weekends when nobody was around. And unfortunately, one of our tech people, if you've ever been in the Capitol and you see a closet you might open up, there's no room for anything. You can't put your coat in there, you can't put shoes in there, because it's stacked with wires because of all the changes that have been made through the time from the first time that they developed them. Well, one of our wiretap individuals, tech, he saw a wire and felt that that wire shouldn't be there, and so he snipped it. And then come Monday morning, when they all returned, there was a lot of things didn't work. And so suddenly the news media took off, and about what's happening down at the Capitol, who's paranoid, why are we doing it, etc., etc. And the things we got a little tight in the commissioner's office, but we finally worked it all out and had a meeting. But in the meantime, things got a little exciting for a while. Anyhow, I don't know if any of you know, but Bob Zinski, he was in charge of the budget. And I know Bob's retired now, but I think he worked for him for about 85 years. Yeah. It seemed that way. 90, okay, that's probably correct. So anyhow, I said, Colonel, don't worry about these things come and go, and it'll go over, and it did. It finally did. But Bob said, Colonel, you have to understand, even though we make mistakes, even though we fumble the ball at times, and we're not perfect as a department, downtown, meaning the Capitol, if they want something done, and they want it done right, they call upon the Pennsylvania State Police, because they know it will be done right, and it will be done correctly, even with the missteps. They are the department that downtown actually calls upon when they need help. I'm going to tell this little story. I saw Joe here tonight, and just a side note of mine, but one time we were in a meeting with Bob Zinski, and I forget what was going on in the colonel's office, but it had to do with something with the law, whatever. And Bob looks at both Joe and I, and he says, well, He said if it happens, it's just misfeasance. It's misfeasance. It's not malfeasance. And Joe and I like, what? You know, it sounds pretty close to me. You know, we don't want any parts of misfeasance or malfeasance, either one. When I worked at the Los Alamos National Laboratory, where I took on a very arrogant political machine that tried to shut me down, where I was trying to do the right thing, and ultimately did do the right thing, and it all turned out well, but it was a furious battle of people who tried to make me do the wrong thing. In fact, I had what my direct boss said to me. He says, Glenn, you need to know you don't work for a governor anymore, meaning state police. He says, you're working for a corporation, and you have to look out for the corporation first. And what he was telling me was, Glenn, it's okay to lie. Okay, that's where he was coming from. This is corporatism. Okay, you protect, you circle the wagons, because you have to protect the corporation. And obviously they didn't do their homework on me. And of course, it's like, no way, there's no way I'm going to get involved in your corruption. But as many people out there that do work there, and it's the only good job in town, if you will, in that particular area of New Mexico. And if they would stand up, they're going to lose their jobs, or they bury them. And so I took them on, and by the grace of God, I won that battle. And but I leaned upon, truly, this is me now, I leaned upon God for the direction and the perseverance to take the machine on. And it went to University of California, to the depths of Washington, D.C. And so God gave me that power in that direction, but I leaned upon what do the Pennsylvania State Police stand for? Because they had no such thing as a code of conduct or anything like that. What do they represent? And so I leaned upon what the Pennsylvania State Police represents in its codes of conduct and what it stands for in order to give me that strength to follow through. I've been an expert witness in federal and state court now since 2002 and deal with a lot of cases in various places in the United States. And I had two different cities in the state of New Mexico, and I had about 8 different cases between the two, and they all dealt with discrimination. And it didn't deal with discrimination against Hispanics, whites, women. It had to do with discrimination against African Americans in New Mexico. Not people on the job, but citizens. And so I leaned upon the era of Ron Sharp. What did we do at that time when we did this battle? The battles that, you know, with the consent decrees. In fact, one city was under consent decree at that time. I don't know if they ever got out or not. But the point was, I leaned again back to the Pennsylvania State Police and what we did here. It's not nirvana. We haven't reached nirvana yet. But we battled and we won many progressive steps at that time. But the Pennsylvania State Police to me is the greatest because of what it stands for and it represents. It doesn't mean that it's perfect, by no means. But it still stands for what I call professional and law enforcement. I have a case right now in another state police organization in America where there's discrimination. And it's discrimination on the inside, but it's a discrimination against a white trooper. And where it's obvious, again, I leaned upon the Pennsylvania State Police. In fact, I use it, again, when you're an expert witness, everything's opinion. It's just not it's opinion, this is my opinion, this is my opinion. But I actually used illustrations in the Pennsylvania State Police. This is how it should be done. You don't do that, and this is the reason you don't do that, because these are the standards of law enforcement in the 21st century. But the Pennsylvania State Police, for me, is the greatest. And we all represented here, not all of us, but we were part of that organization, and still are, many of us that are. At one point in time, there was a young boy in the city of Philadelphia, and his name was Ron Sharp. And at one point in his life, he was involved and he dabbled in things such as basketball, golf, tennis. But he decided one day, I want to be a Pennsylvania State Trooper. He had that desire. I hope to become a Pennsylvania State Trooper. And on the other end, there was a young boy in northeast Pennsylvania, not a city boy, but a country boy. And that country boy was Glenn Wall. And where Ron was doing the sports thing, I was hoeing potatoes, picking beans, and milking cows. Two different environments. country boy, city boy. But that boy too had a desire to be a Pennsylvania State Trooper at one point in his life. And both of their dreams became a reality. And I have a feeling that when Ron graduated, he probably had the same desires I did when I graduated. And that one day, I hope to be Commissioner of the Pennsylvania State Police. That's my goal. In reality, thinking though, the opportunity that it ever happening was probably next to nil. But by the same token, that was my desire. And I feel that Ron felt the same way. Someday, I am going to be Commissioner of the Pennsylvania State Police. That's my goal. Maybe I won't make it, but I am sure going to go after it. That's my goal. Yet these two dreams for these two men became reality. They both made it. They had the desire to become troopers, and they both became troopers. And then those two dreams of the country boy and the city boy met and merged when Ron Sharp called me and said, I would like you to be the Deputy Commissioner of the Pennsylvania State Police, my deputy. I never thought in my world of dreams that would ever happen, but Ron called me in. And so they merged as a great team, and we got the approval of Governor Casey, who is an outstanding man. He's just outstanding. I know for Ron and for me, never once as deputy or commissioner did Bob Casey ever call and say, hey, do this for me. Never once. In fact, I had some of them staffs one time call me and say, would you do this? And I said, no way. And if you keep after me, I'm calling the governor. That was the last call I received. Because they knew how honest Bob Casey was. In fact, his chief of staff before I became commissioner said these words. He says, the governor does not want a politician. He wants a cop. That's it. No politician. You just do your job. And Ron and I were very lucky to be under the command of a governor of that character. Changes began to be made at that time. But I stand here tonight before you at the age of 75. And I want to tell you, I have a thankful, grateful heart for Colonel Ronald M. Sharp, who gave this country boy an opportunity to prove himself to be worthy to be the deputy commissioner and ultimately someday be commissioner. Without Ron, I wouldn't be standing here before you tonight, because Ron chose me. And I can't crawl into his brain and say why he chose me, but I'm so thankful that he did. He gave me that chance. When Glenn graduated from the academy, as I said, he had a game plan. And that game plan was to try to be commissioner. Yet you said, gee, if I make corporal, I'll be happy. And of course, it goes on. But I wanted to be commissioner. And so my game plan was, all right, how am I going to do it? I told my family that I want to be commissioner someday. That's my goal. Realizing, again, the chances would be nil. But my game plan was work hard. Work hard. Keep your nose clean. Be dedicated. Be committed. Spirit ahead with honesty and integrity. And maybe someday, just someday, study hard for the test. That maybe you will make it. And that was my game plan. Now I'm sure Ron had the same game plan. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, and maybe I will have the opportunity someday. Ron was 1962, I was in 1966. And we had that same desire. But Ron was at a great disadvantage compared to this white boy from Northeast Pennsylvania. And that disadvantage for Ron was this, that he was African American. Ron knew this was not going to be easy, because things were tough at that time. He knew when he started, this isn't not going to be a cakewalk because of that. From the moment Ron made that application to the ranks and the attainment of commissioner and the things that he did, he was in a perpetual battle, like many of you were in the state police. But we're talking about Ron tonight, who we come to honor. Ron was in a constant state of battle because of discrimination. In some quadrants, racism, dislike, and even some hatred because of who he was. And that was because he was African American. And Ron was attempted to be stopped so many times, to be blocked, to stop. And I want to make it clear, though, we're not saying everybody in the state police felt that way. We're talking about certain people in certain areas, in certain command structures, in various areas throughout the state. As a trooper, I think I was a lieutenant then, sergeant, I did feel the barbs of the way for what I stood for, against racism, against discrimination. But it was nothing what Colonel Ronald M. Sharp faced as he did these battles. And I know you don't know all the battles that he went through as well as others, but he went through battles. When I worked in research and development, there was a corporal there. He was a white corporal. And when these things were happening with consent decrees and everything was going on, we sat down and we started talking. And this corporal said, you know, we deserve everything we get. And what he meant is, we whites deserve everything we get. He says, I worked out of Troop K, Philadelphia. And he said, I saw what happened at Troop K, Philadelphia. He said, I don't know about any place else, but I know at Troop K, Philadelphia. He said, there would be African Americans that would come in. And they'd have them sit there. They'd fill out the application, make them sit there all day long. And he says, I looked at some of their background, and he said, these are the cream of the crop. These people had tremendous backgrounds, and we needed them. We should have had them. But at the end of the day, they'd walk out the door, and the lieutenant would throw the application in the garbage can. Now, this is coming from a white corporal. He said, we deserve everything we get, because we are discriminatory. Now, is that everybody again? No, it's not everybody. But it's those in certain areas, in certain quadrants, that did do this. There are certain individuals, or were, maybe even today, I don't know, who were just plain old mean. Mean, hard-hearted, driven by hatred, racism, cruel. And I'm here tonight to say to you, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what you had to go through. You and people like you. African Americans. Caused a lot of pain. Caused a lot of agony that you should never had to endure. And for that, I'd say, I'm sorry that you had to deal with that. And more people than that's in this room tonight. And I'm sorry for the disingenuous smiles of lying hearts in certain areas. I'm sorry. Yet when you look at it, if it wasn't for these battles, if it wasn't for these struggles and mistreatment, we wouldn't be where we are today. It's not perfect. Again, it's not nirvana, but it's certainly better than what was way back here. It's better, but it was a struggle. But it was that struggle that changed things. And in life, we know this in our personal lives, struggles can make us stronger. Struggles and getting together and binding together to move forward. That's how we succeed. That's how we move forward. And the consent decree was the driving force that caused that to move forward. It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. Martin Luther King, as many of you know, said this: all lives begin to end the day we remain silent on things that matter. And discrimination is wrong. Racism is wrong. It is just wrong. And whether the moment someone in their mind thought even of bringing Africans from Africa, putting them on a slave boat and bringing them to America, and in the centuries that followed, it was wrong. And discrimination and racism can be control of bodies, it can be control of your brain, it can be control of your emotions. There's lots of forms of discrimination. And it's wrong. It's just wrong. And I think Martin would say, you cannot remain silent. You can't. You can't remain silent because you begin to die. I'm not talking physical death. It's just that being who you are. If you don't struggle and fight, where the fight is there, and you need to keep continuing forward. Because it matters to God. It matters to the human race. It matters. If anything matters, the treatment of a human being really matters. Truly matters. Certainly matters a lot more than a lot of stuff that we seem to get excited about in America. It matters. But I also say, as I know Martin Luther King felt the same way, as you do it, as you do not remain silent, but you speak out, you do it with love. Even though they knew what they did, you do it with love, you do it professionally, you do it as a statement exactly as Colonel Ronald M. Sharp did and many others. That's how you win. Because I believe ultimately righteousness will prevail. It will, ultimately. But it doesn't mean there's not going to be struggles. There is going to be pain. Through the guardian efforts, through the wisdom of Judge Green, and through the valiant fight of your legal commander, Harold Goodman, so many good things happened within that process. They just did. They just did. But it wasn't easy. Yeah, I think they deserve a clap. Speaking about Ron Sharp, the man, and Byron touched on it here. For what Ron went through, and you have no idea what Ron and many others went through, and they're not going to stand up and say, well, I was hurt here, I was hurt there, and they did this, and they did. They're not going to do that, okay? They may talk among themselves. But I know some of the things that they've gone through. Terrible things. Ron was just discriminated against and tried to be blocked, and to get him to the point where maybe he'd quit, he'd stop, and they threw all stumbling blocks in front of him and were arrogant to him, changed the rules as to how these troopers were treated. They were treated differently. But he kept moving on and kept moving on. He always did as a statesman. What Ron went through, maybe the average person say, well, all right, Ron, you're the boss now. You're commissioner. It's time for payback. It's time for vengeance. It's time for retribution, but that's not who Ron Sharp was. He was a man of character. He fought. He did not keep silent, but he did it always and always professionally, and continued forward in fighting. That's not who Ron was. Ron and I had a lot of talks, personal talks. It was just Ron and I. And when you have personal talks on all sorts of things, you get to know the person. You get to know the man in this case. Ron knew me, I knew him. And sometimes you talk about personal stuff. But we work together as a team. And his desire, I can tell you from my personal experience, his desire from the moment he became Commissioner of the State Police, as Ben touched on, was not vengeance, payback. His desire was to try to make the Pennsylvania State Police the best state police organization in America. That was his goal. His desire was to treat everybody with dignity and respect, no matter who you were. It didn't matter on what level you were. Everybody must be treated fairly, honestly. He was integrity driven. Ron Sharp, too, as we well know, he was really interested in education, because Ron knew that education was a major key in the resolution of social issues. A major, not the only key, but a major key. Ron Sharp knew that education is a significant key in battling the oppressor and lifting up the oppressed. Ron knew that. And so it didn't matter. When I was deputy commissioner, one of the jobs Ron gave me, which I spent many weekends and time at night doing, I had to review every internal investigation the state police had. Every one. And the time that I was there, it was around 3,000. Read them all. Some were very thin, some were very thick. But I read them all. And the reason was this: to ensure every member of the Pennsylvania State Police, no matter who you were. Ron didn't walk up to Glenn and say, look, just look for minority issues here, or just look for women issues, or Asian, or whatever. He said, you review every one of these, and I want to make sure every person is treated fairly. That someone, the balance of there was for no matter who it was. And there were many cases that I would turn back and say, hey, we didn't cover this. What about this? This doesn't seem right. But that was my job to do that. And that was Ron's direction. But again, it was his desire to make sure everybody in the state police were treated honestly and fairly. And that was the character of Ron Sharp, one part of it. Ron Sharp also was a solid leader. And by that I mean this: it's a tough job being a leader, as, again, I know Ty knows all about. It's tough, it's not easy. But he was also a disciplinarian. And what that means is this: if someone through the investigation was found wanting, they had to pay the price. Didn't matter who you were. If you're wrong, you're wrong. But if you were right, you were exonerated. That was the goal. And that was Ron Sharp, the man. Teaching at Penn State University, they asked me to develop a course called Policing Ethics from the ground up. And during the time that I did this for Penn State in the United States and internationally, one of the illustrations I used during my classes, I'm going to give to you tonight to make a point about Ron Sharp. And I would ask the class, and this amounted to hundreds and hundreds of different people, police officers, men and women. And I said, I want you to write down on a piece of paper the name of a person, just one person. They could be living, dead, mom, dad, grandpa, uncle, political leader, preacher, priest, or whatever. Write down who you respect the most in your life up to this point. And then give me a small paragraph as to why. Why? Why do you choose this person? And this wasn't about who do you love. It was about who you respect. Because you can love someone and not even respect them. But who do you respect the most? And why? And I would collect them, and then at lunchtime I would go through them all. And invariably, in all the cases that were forwarded to me, in every case, when you would ask, what is the reason? Now, they'd say it in different language, or different words, and different phrases, because they said, because of who they were. They were honest. They were kind to me. They were my standard. They helped me. I liked them. They helped people. You see, none of them said was because this trooper made the most DUI arrests. Or this officer, he arrested this really bad serial killer. Or did this fantastic thing, and that's why I select them because and respect him. None of that. It was always because of who they were as a person. Who they were as a human being. And when we were lowered into the ground, or burned, or in the middle of the ocean, it doesn't matter. What you will be remembered for when it's all over is, who were you? What kind of person were you? And I'm here tonight to tell you that Ron Sharp, through my personal evaluation through the years, was a man of character. Now, Ron did a lot of good things for the Pennsylvania State Police. A lot of good things. I'm going to touch a few here shortly. But that's not why I'm honoring Ron Sharp. I'm honoring Ron Sharp, and I love the man because of who he was as a person. Even though he was crucified, so to speak, through his life, along with many others, there was never retribution. There was never hatred in return. It was love. Ron had a sense of humor, and I wanted to bring this up. I know I know Jesse remembers this, when we were out at a CARE conference, Combined Accident Reduction Effort. I got that stuff drilled in my head, all these acronyms for the state police, I can't get rid of them. And we were in Santa Fe, and the only time I got a chance to really take vacation is to go to a conference. I'd take 2 or 3 days and try to get away from it all. And anyhow, Ron came out, and unfortunately he had a heart attack. And I know Jesse did a lot ensuring Ron lived under that circumstance. But anyhow, as we were talking, he was about ready to come back, and I think Ben was there. I'm not sure, but I think Ben was there. And Ron said, "Don't start making any award for me yet. I'm not dead yet," okay? And now I'm sure from his heavenly post, he said, "Okay, now it's time. You can do it." And by the way, I'm most pleased for the award that you're thinking of giving regarding the scholarship at the university. I think it's a fabulous idea, whoever came up with it. I think it's absolutely fabulous, and another good way of remembering and keeping in the front Colonel Sharp. Ron and others were trailblazers. They really were. And Ron became a member of the state police in 1962. He was in a recruitment program at that time there was about 3,500 troopers, and there were about, I think, 29 African American troopers. That percentage is way off, okay? That was way off. 20th century technology, Ron brought in the automated fingerprint identification system from a tech end. Traffic safety, he brought in the motorcycle patrol again. Drug enforcement, he brought in the K-9, which has been fantastic in the state police. Some outstanding things, but I say one of the greatest things Ron Sharp did for the Pennsylvania State Police was the idea of this, of recruiting his human interaction and services, of upping the recruitment system as it did with minorities, all minorities. He did that, but here's the crux of the thing when you do it with Ron Sharp. Yes, statistics sound good, and that's fine. The idea of recruiting and having a very healthy recruitment system is very important, which he was involved in, and that's all good. But Ron Sharp's ideal was this: you just don't bring them in. When they're in, you treat them right from the beginning, from the academy, throughout their career. You treat people right. And that was Ron Sharp's goal. So the other stuff is good, and it has to be. But you just can't bring in people and say, "Oh, okay, we got them here, we got a statistic, we're okay now we've reached the goal." No, you got to treat them right, no matter who they are. And that was Ron Sharp. When I graduated from the academy, I had the honor of being the class speaker from my classmates. And at the end of my speech, I gave the illustration I'm going to give here tonight. And it's the story about a young farm boy. And of course, I know about farming. So the illustration is dear to me. But if you've ever worked in a farm, one of the things you have to learn as a young boy is how to plow. Now that may sound, well, that's pretty easy. Put the plow on the ground and you go. Well, if you don't know what you're doing, you know, the furrow goes this way and it goes this way, and you might see something over here, and you're looking over here, and next thing you go flying over here. And anyhow, the young boy, his dad would come to him and say, "Hey, you got to learn how to plow this field. You know, it looks like you've been nipping the cider the way you're going around here." And so the boy tried, but he could never get it right. So he went to his dad. He says, "All right, teach me. How do you do it? I don't know how to do it." And so the father said, "Okay, I'm going to teach you. The goal, or the way you do it is this." He said, "At the beginning of the field, when you start, you put your plow into the ground, you're on that tractor, you sink that plow in, and then you look at the end of the field, and you fix your eyes on something at the end, and you never take your eyes off of it. Never, no matter what happens. You don't take your eyes off it. When you get to the end of the field, you can look back and you can see a straight and narrow furrow." And so Ron Sharp, when he stuck his plow in the ground at Troop K, Philadelphia, knowing all these things that were coming, or could come, and things happened that he didn't even know about or think about, but he never took his eyes off the mark. And that mark for Ron Sharp was dedication, commitment, honesty, integrity. Don't give up. Don't take your eyes off the mark. No matter these people who tried to throw these stones in front of you, who tried to delay you to go this way and make you quit, to embarrass you, to cut you down. And there was many that got in Ron's path, but Ron never took his eye off the mark. And so when Ron finished the Pennsylvania State Police, and to this day, you can look at the furrow of Ron Sharp and say that is a straight, that is a narrow furrow. And that was Colonel Ronald M. Sharp. Colonel Ronald M. Sharp. And that's why I'm here tonight to honor that man, because I love that man. He was not only kind to me, he was kind to everybody. And I say to you, I thank you for inviting me. I wish you continued success in this under Colonel Sharp. Thank you, sir. Good evening.
How you doing, sir? Good.
Thank you so much, Glenn. I can't get used to that. You're still Colonel to me, I'm sorry. But thank you so much. I'd like to bring up another colonel who I first met as a lieutenant on the shores of Raystown Lake, along with two other folks. But at that time, when I met him then, he was, as Leonard said about Ron, pouring into this young, just out of the academy, first assignment trooper, about what this job really was. And I thank all of you in this room who have poured into my life, without which I would have never gotten out of the Pennsylvania State Police what I did. But to make a long introduction even longer, I wanted to bring up to the podium the current colonel of the Pennsylvania State Police, the current commissioner, Tyree Blocker.
Well, good evening. And boy, I'm so glad to see so many familiar faces, people that I've had the pleasure of working with over the years. I will try to be brief here. Those of you that know me know that's very difficult, right? Blocker and brief, they don't go together. But I'm working on it, to say the least. Glenn, I certainly appreciate those kind words and the time that you've taken to be here with us this evening to pay tribute to an outstanding human being, and that is my friend, our friend, Ronald M. Sharp. One of the things that I had the pleasure of doing in the state police is the ability to learn from a lot of previous commissioners, a lot of previous members. And when I think of Ron Sharp, I think of a pioneer, someone who defied a lot of preconceived notions about African Americans joining the Pennsylvania State Police. He was clearly a pioneer when you think about the state of affairs in 1962. The other thing that I focus on when I think of my good friend Ron Sharp is the ultimate professional. He had a command of policing. He had exceptional interpersonal skills. He was fair. And he cared about the job. That professionalism never escaped me. And of course, the third thing when I think of Ron Sharp is a leader. Someone who, on a daily basis, exhibited leadership. And I'll even say superior leadership in the things that he did to ensure that the Pennsylvania State Police was a better agency. Because not only because he served, but because African Americans were put in positions to serve the citizens and visitors to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So I never lose sight of the fact that Ron demonstrated leadership on a daily basis. And of course, I also put the moniker on my good friend Ron to say that he was a mentor. A mentor to many, but I'll speak for myself. Just as Glenn Wolf said he assisted him in certain things, I can tell you in a very specific way what Ron did for my career. I was a young trooper that was a little headstrong, to say the least. But Ron saw that I had something that he could work with, to say the least. And I tell people this, that I remember getting a call from the Colonel, Sharp, who proposed to me that he wanted to challenge me. And I thought I was going to get some kind of great assignment or something like that. I was a young lieutenant. He said, "No, I'm sending you to the FBI National Academy." I went, "Wow, really?" And he had the faith and confidence in me. For some reason, he saw something that he could work with. And I will never forget that, because chances are I don't go to the FBI National Academy if it's not for Ron Sharp. He provided me that opportunity, and I'm forever thankful for that. But it didn't stop there, because in 1990, there again, a young, brash lieutenant, I get a call one day, and it's the Colonel. "Come see me." I'm thinking, this could be good, or this could maybe not so good. But it was good, because I walked in his office, he set me down, he closed the door, and he offered me promotion to the rank of captain. And I'll tell you, I noted such sincerity in how he shared that opportunity with me. And not only did he offer me the rank of captain, he also had enough confidence to give me a troop command. And boy, was that significant. So when I look at Ron from a mentor perspective, but the last point that I wanted to make with respect to my good friend Ron Sharp, yes, he was a mentor, but ladies and gentlemen, he was my friend. Okay? He was my friend. So, I think many of you know that at the State Police Academy, we give a deserving cadet now a leadership award, and it's named after Ronald M. Sharp. It's the Ronald M. Sharp Leadership Award for a deserving cadet. And that award talks about the cadet that exemplifies leadership, integrity, vision, courage, and honesty. And we chose the name that award, the Leadership Award, and the Colonel Ron Sharp Award, because Ron Sharp exhibited in his day-to-day life, both on and off the job, he demonstrated those qualities of leadership, integrity, vision, courage, honesty. I am so pleased to be here this evening. And I'm extremely pleased to have a partnership with Westchester University to ensure that we support the Colonel Ronald M. Sharp Scholarship at Westchester University for a deserving criminal justice student who's of African American descent. We've reached out to Westchester University, we've cultivated that partnership, and they have been a team player with the Pennsylvania State Police in continuing to honor the legacy of Ron Sharp. And I know tonight we have a representative from Westchester University here, Deb Cornelius. I'm sure we'll hear from her. But I know we have a lot of other speakers here. But I want to go on record in saying that I believe I have the first check for the Ronald M. Sharp Scholarship at Westchester University. So I want to bring Deb up here tonight and present that to her. It is my pleasure, along with my beautiful wife Janice, to make this contribution, the initial contribution to the Ronald M. Sharp Scholarship at Westchester University. So, Deb, thank you.
Thank you.
And really appreciate you being here. And I'm sure there'll be many more that will be contributing. If not tonight, Deb will tell you about the mechanism to participate in the Ronald M. Sharp Scholarship for a deserving criminal justice major at Westchester University. Once again, thank all of you for being here. I'm so glad to see a lot of faces that I haven't seen before, but individuals in my career that our paths have crossed. And you're all looking very, very good. Enjoy the rest of your night, and once again, thank you for your attendance.
I get the privilege to introduce a man that I first met when he was a representative and not the former director of the former Secretary of Health in Pennsylvania. And one of the reasons why that's so significant to me is because when I was having problems becoming a cadet, it was this man and the late Dave Richardson that pointed me in the direction of Harold Goodman. And if it wasn't for that alteration of course, I would not be here this evening. So it's my distinct pleasure to introduce John White, Jr.
Man, you better stop lying. If it wouldn't have been Dave Richardson or I, it would have been somebody else right now. I want to say thank you so much for this invitation, and to my dear friend, Colonel Walt. Glenn, I think it was your first Academy graduation class that I was your speaker. The second? You don't remember? Look, well, you are older than me. I do remember that you were there when I gave that terrific graduation speech. You were fantastic. You had so much on your mind. Right? Thank you so much, and to the Sharp family. One small correction: I was Secretary of Welfare, not Health. The distinction is the Secretary of Health never got sued. And the only man in Pennsylvania who ever got sued more than me is a man you're going to hear for a day. I asked my granddaughter to come with me tonight. My grandmother is 15 years old. She's a sophomore at Engineering and Science High School in Philadelphia. I wanted her to come because she is not going to be void of history. She is not going to be a victim of the bigotry of mediocrity. She's also going to know that it did not come easy. See, when we look at things, most of the time we look at it in today's context. I'm going to really hurry up, okay? But we have a tendency to look at things in today's context. Think about it. When you speak of the act of humility of Jesus washing the feet of the disciples, it's one thing if you thought they took off their socks and shoes and came up the steps and the sidewalks were paved. No. They didn't have sidewalks. They didn't have running water. They didn't have bathrooms. They had no place to dispose of their waste, and it rained that night. And they walked through that mud and that dirt and that mess. Now, does that give you a better sense of how humble that was?
Paint the picture.
Reality. You don't know the reality of what was going on that led to Ron Sharp's rise in the state police. Colonel did a marvelous job in giving us an inside-out view. He was right. When Jim Brown or Jack Tighe spoke to you, they told him that they did not want the politician. You know why? Because I wore two hats. I was the Secretary of the Department of Public Welfare, and tell me if I'm wrong, David, I was the politician. I brought some in, and I took some out. But I'm going to tell you a story that will never be published. It was the night before he took that ride to Scranton to be asked to serve as a member of the Pennsylvania State Police Commission, as a commissioner. The governor called me and he said, "John, I need to talk to you." He corrected himself and he said, "No, I need to hear from you." He told me of a series of meetings that he had had with members of the state senate. It's a political problem, because the senate leaders that he met with, I'm not going to name names, but the record will show who they are and who they were. They told him that there is no way that he could appoint Ronald Sharp as commissioner of the Pennsylvania State Police. It couldn't happen. You see, he had already messed up as governor. He named David Owens the first black commissioner of corrections in the United States of America. He named Barton Fields the first black Secretary of Revenue. He named me the first black Secretary of the Department of Public Welfare, the largest agency in state government. I had a $14 billion budget. He'd already messed up. No, we laugh now. I am telling you what I know. He had already been accused of giving the store away, Homer. And you gonna put them in charge of the cops? That was an ugly time. This was a man who served at every rank. He followed all the rules. Your daddy did everything he was supposed to do to succeed in life. But there were people who were in serious decision-making positions who just could not accept that reality. And today we see pictures and we hear the stories. I don't think you can go to an African-American class in a state college in Pennsylvania and they would know who Ron Sharp is. That's why my granddaughter is here.
Yes, yes.
Listen, if we don't take a minute and let our children and grandchildren know that this does not come as easy as it appears to you.
Right.
Nobody just knocked on the door and they opened it and said, come on in. But we didn't come in naked either. We brought it. He brought what it took to lead the Pennsylvania State Police that increased the positive perception Pennsylvanians had. He represented our state on the national level. He was admired by people who didn't know him. That's why she's here. Last thing, and I'm going to take my seat. The other side of that emotion is to appreciate the words thank you. I appreciate the Colonel in apologizing for the actions of others. I was struck by the fact that nobody moved. He apologized for the actions of others that were cruelty against our people. And we sat here like bumps on a log. If you don't put your hands together and thank this man for not only what he said in his apology, but for the example that he has set across this nation, you better clap your hands. Some of you are too young to understand what I'm saying. But ask an old timer. They'll tell you. In our lifetime, you ain't never heard those stuff like that. Thank you. Just like we thank Mom. What makes thank you so powerful? Story in the Bible of the 10 lepers who saw Jesus afar off, and they called out to him and asked that he cleanse and heal them. Can you imagine? They had to shout this. They're separated from their families, ostracized from their loved ones, their community, living in clustered clans. They asked him to cleanse and heal them. He told them to go and not speak of what happened. And along their way, they were cleansed. Can you imagine that? How happy would you be? Let's pause and think about, see context? How happy would you have been? But one ran back. He fell prostrate on his face and thanked God. Context? Today, when somebody says thank you, we give the obligatory, you're welcome. Doesn't matter whether you mean it or not. It's just passe. You say thank you, I say you're welcome. Thank you. Those words are so important to my Christ. Some of y'all know him. He didn't say you're welcome. He asked, where are the other 9? I ask you, where are the other 9? We represent one. Where are the other 9? Where are the other people who have benefited from Ron Sharp's service? Where are they? You see them every day. Where are they? Do they have any idea? Your troopers that are coming in, I know we have an award named after him in the state police, but do they really understand the nature of this man? And you know what's going to happen? You're going to hand them that award and they're going to say thank you. What are you going to say? You're welcome. No. Where are the 9? Where are the others who benefited from this man's service and continue and benefit others as a result? Where are the other 9? I'm glad that we gathered here tonight as a demonstration that we're among the one. But when we leave here, let's go find the other 9, bro. Let's go find the other 9. And let them really know what thank you means. Thank you all very, very much.
Well, every so often I get very blocked in my brain because I'm running through the Rolodex of response. And some of them come to my mind and I say, no, you can't say that. No, you can't say that. But what I can say is that that was a very powerful statement. And exactly that, necessary. Because that's a charge and a challenge to each and every one of us. Because there's no reason that this is only 2 parts of a 3-part ballroom, except for we aren't looking out for that other 9. And it's really our responsibility to do so. But again, let me go back to what I'm supposed to do, which is to bring up Deb Cornelius to explain and discuss a little bit more about what the Ron Sharp Scholarship is all about and how we can participate, even though Colonel Blocker wrote the first check. There's nothing that says somebody in here can't be second, or third, or the 9th. Thank you so much, Deb.
Okay, so I'm not going to kid you. That's a hard act to follow. First, I do actually really want to say a sincere thank you for having me and my husband, who is actually a former local police officer, here tonight. We're just really excited to be here. In all honesty, it's been a true honor to get a little bit of a glimpse of who Colonel Sharp was. A little saddened that I didn't get to meet him in person. But I will tell you what I have gleaned and what I know is that he was clearly a man of character and of integrity, and a man who really saw the potential in others. Which is why I want to take just a minute to speak to why the Colonel Sharp Scholarship is so meaningful to the students at Westchester. As I'm sure many of you know, Westchester is the largest of the 14 state institutions that we have here in Pennsylvania. It is an extremely affordable institution. I'm actually an alumna myself, and I know I have several other Golden Rams in the room. But because of that affordability, it draws a really unique set of students. Many of our students are still first-generation college students. Many of our students are plugging away at putting themselves through school on their own dime. We actually have 40 students on campus who come from homeless situations with no parental advice, guidance, or support in any way, shape, or form. And as a result of that, when we send them out into the world, what we hear back from the employers that hire them is that our students have grit and determination because they've done it themselves and they've worked hard to do it. I recently had the privilege of speaking with one of our other scholarship recipients, Paloma Perez, and she shared with me that she was holding down 4 jobs. She had managed to get a 3.8 GPA without being able to afford a single book, right? A single book. And she said to me, I can't begin to tell you the burden that this takes off of me by having some financial assistance. And then she kind of got some tears in her eyes and she said, but more than that, it means that someone else besides myself believes in me. And I think that's really the message that comes from Colonel Sharp, that it seems as though he believed in so many people. He gave that opportunity to so many people. And I think that's the message it sends if you choose to give to the Colonel Sharp Scholarship tonight or after tonight. It really, while it lessens the financial burden, sends the message that that student is not alone and that there are others who believe that they can achieve and they can do it. I know that there are so many amazing accomplishments in this room. Having those role models for our students is indispensable. As we award this each year, we will be sure to tell the story of Colonel Sharp. The student will be well aware of the legacy that comes with the scholarship. And I think that legacy really is about believing in others. And I hope that you'll be part of that legacy. We hope to bring the scholarship to an endowment level so that it will be given every year in perpetuity. It will live on forever. Should you choose to be part of that, I just want to take a minute to share how you can. I know some of you have already picked up the envelopes that were on the table. Inside it contains several things. There's a letter regarding the scholarship. Thank you, Vanna. A little tribute inside about Colonel Sharp, as well as a pledge card, a response card that you can check off with credit card information. You can send a check in that would be made out to the Westchester University Foundation. If you choose to do that tonight, I will be here. I'm sure that Ben or Stephanie would be more than happy as well to be able to collect that for you. And if you choose to mull it over or talk to someone at home about it, there's a return address envelope in there that you can just send back to the foundation. I just want to close by saying what a privilege it is to have this legacy live on at Westchester. We are striving for a place where all are welcome, and I think this is one more step in moving forward in that direction. So we're honored, and thank you so much for having me here tonight.
I had told Deb earlier I'd try to do that if she didn't make it, but I'd probably mess it up. And I was probably right. She did a wonderful job. Thank you so much. It is my distinct pleasure and privilege to bring up someone who has been a stalwart pillar of our state government for a long time. And that is Homer Floyd, the former director of the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission.
Good evening. Good evening. When Major Brooks called me and indicated that he wanted to make a few remarks, I should have asked him who's going to be the other speakers on the podium. You just turned it out, and there's not a lot I can say. But I met Ron Sharp when I came to Harrisburg in 1970. And at that point, he had as one of his missions, not only the advancement of his own career, but also the advancement of others. That is why you ended up with a consent decree not because of the aggressiveness of someone else, but it was Ron and the little crew, Ben, Brooks, and several others. And by the way, could the assigners of that decree, could you please stand? We have a few in the room. Come on, get up. All right. These are the champions. These are the people that Harold groomed and helped them to get the right spots, to get the right decision. And Harold Goodman, we can't thank you enough for that. It was kind of like Brian Faith in stepping out because we didn't have road maps. We didn't have road maps to ABC this process. And as a result, we had to rely on certainly our legal counsel and others and some faith as it relates to the decision that ultimately resulted in not one, two, or three, but a bunch of people came in under that decree. A bunch of them. And we are indebted to them for that. But Ron kind of was a leader. And we would talk individually, and sometimes as a small group, we'd get together and talk. We talked about the recruitment and the absence of an effective recruitment program. The screening, who gets screened in and who gets screened out. The technical kind of things that our applicants would get kicked out on. We thought that there were hurdles that others didn't weren't subject to. And you had mentioned some of that earlier, Colonel. And having done that and gone through that process, it made it easier, but we had to fight, and they had to fight every step of the way, because at every point they wanted to close out the consent decree because it had done its job, they thought, or they said. That was the reaction. So Ron would share his own goals, but at the same time said that we've got to have more people doing more things in state police, because some of our people are not getting a square deal. And it's in that context that over a period of time, we developed a relationship with the state police. And most of the commissioners during that period of time would be open to having you come and speak and having you share your thoughts and some recommendations. But sometimes it wouldn't get down to the lower level where the decisions are made and the interaction goes. So, but Ron set a tone that made it easy for us to work with Colonel when you took over. It was you and Ron were the best commissioners, we thought, to work with over the years that the 41 years I was in state government and dealt with many of these issues. So Ron Sharp has his place in history. It's important for all of us to recognize that. But at the same time, we've got to make new ground and plow new ground, because if you look, some of us may be back on the farm if we're not careful with some of these policies that are being developed and some of these things that we're hearing, because we're losing out. And it's important. The most recent election, only 16% of Harrisburg eligible voters turned out. For the county, only 26% of the registered voters turned out to vote. Now, that's sad. That's sad. And we've got to get off our behinds and begin to work, or else we're losing ground. Now, let me just tell you a little anecdote. There was this teacher who was teaching her class that alcohol and drugs were harmful to the human body. So she had a couple of lessons on it, and she said, gee, I'm not getting through these kids. I got to do something dramatic. So she got a beaker of water and put it on the table, and she put a beaker of alcohol, 100 proof whiskey, and took an earthworm, put it in a beaker of water. It floated around, feeling no pain. She then put it in the beaker of whiskey, and it stiffened straight out and dropped to the bottom of the beaker and died. She said, well, what do you think you got from that experiment? The young man jumped up, raised his hand, and she called upon him. He says, teacher, I think you proved conclusively, if you drink good whiskey, you won't have worms. Now, what am I saying? An identical set of circumstances can do different things, mean different things to different people. It depends on your previous experience, your background, what things you have gone through, and what things you haven't gone through. So we have a society in which we have our experiences, but there are others out there have theirs. And sometimes we're not sympathetic to either one of them. We're not sympathetic to theirs, and they're not sympathetic to ours. But the real damning thing now is that when is an apple not an apple? Some people call it a banana now. You know what I'm talking about. An identical set of circumstances at this point is in which we find that I don't care what it is, this is the direction we're going to go. And don't care who it hurts or whatever. And that's the thing that I think we have to recognize, that we are in danger when people don't tell the truth, and when we distort things even further than our perceptions that we have, we're in serious trouble. And I think that Ron laid the framework for our advocacy to overcome many of the challenges that still exist out there. And let's get to work and do it. Before I close, I want to introduce one of my former staff members, Carl Brunson over there, was Regional Director of our Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission. So thank you very much for the opportunity, but we do have to recognize that we've got to get to work.
I get to introduce somebody that I have the honor of calling a friend, but I want to do it in telling you a little story. There was a little boy on the beach one morning and overnight, and if you've heard this before, you know where I'm going. And if you haven't, good, I'll sound like I'm an original. When he gets out, he goes out on the beach and he sees thousands upon thousands of starfish that got washed up over the tides. So the little boy gets down, picks up the first starfish he gets to, tosses it back in the ocean. And he does that repeatedly for the remainder of the morning. And a man comes by, watching this little kid, picking up these starfish and throwing them back into the ocean. And the man says, why are you doing that, kid? You'll never get all thousands and thousands of these starfish back into the ocean. He bends down, picks up one, tosses it back in and says, I made a difference to that one. That man made a difference to 1,000 of us that are trying to get on to the Pennsylvania State Police. And he may not have opened it up and thrown everybody into the ocean, but at least when others wouldn't, he put the effort in. And it's that introduction I give to my friend, Harold Goodman.
I met your father and your husband 43 years ago. Our relationship developed far more than attorney-client. We became friends. We had mutual interest in politics, faced left. We had interest in literature, in jazz, Coltrane, Davis, Miles, modern jazz quartet, and we had interest in sports. Your father loved the Philadelphia, what were they called it? Warriors 76ers. And he thought they were the most superb team of all time. And I came from Boston. And I grew up with Bill Russell and Sam Jones and Bob Cousy. And I reminded him that there were 11 banners hanging from the Boston Garden. Out of 13 years, he wouldn't talk to me for about a week and a half. But we became more than friends.
Speak up.
He became my insight to what was going on with the state police. So when Bill Bolden was fired as the clock struck midnight and his probationary term ended, he was let go because he had co-signed a loan that was allegedly overdue but was not. So we brought the original lawsuit for Bill Bolden. But your father called me, and we got together in Philadelphia. And he told me something like that has never happened before. And he was giving me the names of about 10 state police officers who not only had loans outstanding, but had judgments on their homes and had been executed on. And they're all white. And they had never been fired or suspended. So we tried Bill Bolden's case with your father's help. And Judge Green ordered him reinstated with back pay. And then the case evolved into a class action. And to do that, 16 people intervened in April of 1974. 8 rejected minorities to the force, and 8 already on it. And one person was deemed to be the representative of that whole group, and is the first name when Judge Green signed the amendment making the case a class action. Ronald Chuck. And the case proceeded, and I want to just give you a couple of names that many of you may not even know. On the side of those who were rejected, a man named Richard Payton testified, and your father had drawn him to my attention. He'd been an officer in Vietnam, honorably discharged. He subsequently became a municipal police officer. He was rejected by the state police because they said, we can't find his application. And I called Ron. He said, give me a few minutes. And he called me back, and he said, I have it. He was put before Judge Green as a plaintiff. He testified. He became a state police officer, and he got back pay. A man named Richard Lester, strong man, 6'1", 210 pounds, could have played linebacker for any professional football team. The state police deemed him to be too heavy. I called your dad. And he said, let me tell you the names of some people who are 5'8" and 300 pounds. And they couldn't play linebacker for a little kids team. And Richard became a member of the state police, and he was awarded back pay. And then there was a man named Gregory Spells from Erie, Pennsylvania, who in his oral interview was asked questions like this. Who was Sigmund Freud? And what are your beliefs about the Black Panthers? His answers to those questions led him to be rejected as an applicant, even though he was otherwise qualified. He too became part of your case, and your father mentored him, and he was awarded back pay by the court. And then there were his friends, his closest friends, brothers. He's looking at me now, Ben Brooks. And people have talked about the consent decree in this case. It occurred after 4 weeks of a trial in which anecdotal testimony of the sort I've mentioned was elicited. Statistical evidence showing there are only 62 minorities in the state police out of over 4,100. Only 2 held a rank above trooper. And Governor Shapp finally intervened and said we must have a consent decree in this case. And it was entered on June 20th of 1974. And we thought, how foolishly, that in 3 years the state police would be integrated. There would be job-related standards for entry and for promotion. We were naive. State police stopped hiring any cadets for 3 years, stopped any promotions for 2 years. So we filed a motion for contempt of court with Ron Sharp and Ben Brooks being critical witnesses in a federal court in Philadelphia, for which Ben Brooks, who had the temerity, I know that word really doesn't apply to Ben, had the temerity in testifying, for which he was suspended for 3 days for being a witness in a federal courthouse, for which your father said, we got to do something for Ben. And Ben was reinstated with back pay. And then there was Richard McDowell. Richard McDowell was an aide-de-camp, a driver for then Attorney General Packard. However, he did not hold the rank of his other contemporaries, and he was paid far less than they were. And Ron said, got to take care of him. So he had a hearing, and Judge Green listened to the evidence, and Judge Green ordered him promoted, and Judge Green ordered him to be given back pay for the years that he had been underpaid. That is the sort of person your father was. He was a leader, but he didn't look for the praise. He didn't look to be number one. He wanted it to be done for others. And 25 years later, in 1999, 62 minorities had swelled to approximately 550, with minorities at every level of the state police. And in November of 1987, when he was appointed the commissioner, he asked me and my wife if we could bring our daughter, then 8 months old, to his coronation. And there's a picture in my office. It's of Ron cradling Sarah in his left arm. She was very small compared to your father. And next to him was Governor Casey. And before coming up here tonight, I showed that picture again to Sarah, and she reminded me of what she wanted me to say, which was, I too want to make a difference. I want to be like that man.
I grabbed a hold of him because I didn't want him to leave for a couple of reasons, not the least of which is that I am truly enamored with how succinctly he can give a slice of our department's history and how well he recalls it. But I also have something I have to give to you. So, on behalf of the men and women of the Pennsylvania State Guardians, if I didn't break it, I'm going to read it to you before I present it. On behalf of the Pennsylvania Star Guardians, in recognition of your untiring efforts in achieving positive diversity and inclusion within the Pennsylvania State Police, this humanitarian award is presented to Harold I. Goodman, Esquire.
I'm speechless.
I'm not going to say that's a first, but I would bet a paycheck on it. And I have the privilege and honor to bring up to this podium the Honorable David Owens, the former Secretary of Corrections.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the delay. I was sitting there in fear of following John Way. John, I had the joy and pleasure of serving the citizens of this great state. And at my swearing in, I thanked Governor Casey on behalf of my family for giving us the opportunity to serve. And that service was really the high point of my life, because I served with four just outstanding individuals. John, while he was the youngest of the group, he was the master politician. Ron Sharp and I were career law enforcement officers. Guys, take this in the way I mean it, but we're not very tactful. I mean, for us, it's straightforward. There it is. And at meetings, Ron and I might be looking at each other saying, are you going to say it or am I going to say it? And then John would tell us both to shut up. It is a great pleasure for me to be here this evening. I was playing basketball with Ron when we were very young, on a schoolyard. Yes, to tell somebody from Philadelphia that Boston, that's not good. I know the rivalry has not continued, but for guys from my generation, it's very real. They used to beat us every year. It was not good. And Ron told me that I'm going to become a policeman. So I said, that's great, Ron. I said, when you get up the academy, there's another Ron Sharp up there. He says, no. I'm going to be a Pennsylvania State policeman. I said, Ron, stop playing around. There's no African Americans in the Pennsylvania State Police. He said, well, there is now. And then I met another fellow named Ben Brooks, and he had that same dream. What's wrong with those guys? It's not going to happen. And if it does happen, all sorts of hurdles will be put in front of you. And Ron did become a member of the Pennsylvania State Police. And Ron did move through the ranks. We sort of lost touch of each other as I moved through the ranks in Philadelphia. And in 1987, Governor Casey called me and asked me to come to Harrisburg. And when I arrived at the Capitol in Harrisburg, there were these motorcycle guys out there. Glenn, I didn't know what was going on. I said, what's the problem? Well, the legislators are about to pass a law that you have to wear a helmet. And these guys do not want to wear a helmet. We'll bring you in another door. And I met Governor Casey, and you're absolutely right, Glenn. And that's why John and I looked at each other. I have given some pretty controversial orders, and Governor Casey never once called me and said, David, what'd you think about this? He was just an outstanding human being. And while he appointed 4 African-American secretaries and commissioners, he appointed 5 females for the first time to cabinet positions. We just had an outstanding cabinet. And I really look back on those days. Let me tell you just three quick stories. Well, it may not be that quick. And I'll take my seat. Ron called me and told me, hey, look, David, we're going to do the background check. And I've assigned troopers to do the background check. So I told Ron, I said, Ron, you don't have to do that. I said, call the agent in charge of the FBI in Philadelphia, and I have clearance, and they will tell you, you know. He said, FBI? We are the oldest investigative body in the United States. I said, Ron, do the background check. Fine, do the background check. And he reminded me of that on numerous occasions while we were talking about, he said, you know, maybe we should do a background check again. And I said, no, you're the oldest investigative body in the United States, I'm sure your officers. After Camp Hill, and I'm so glad Glenn is here because Glenn can confirm what I'm saying. After Camp Hill, Ron and I appeared on panels. We went around the country, and I talked about prison riots, and I'm so glad I have 2 outstanding prison people here. Usually riots, especially of that magnitude, ends very badly. People get killed, people get maimed, and I take a lot of pride in talking about Camp Hill. No one got killed at Camp Hill. We didn't lose 1 officer, we didn't lose 1 inmate. And that's a tribute to the Pennsylvania State Police. Tribute to professionalism and to the training and to the leadership of the Pennsylvania State Police. Ron has told me on numerous occasions that it was him. I said, no, it was Glenn. I talked to Glenn. I didn't. He said, yeah, who sent Glenn? He said, who sent Glenn? And Glenn and I talked on, I said, he never talked to you. We talked on the telephone constantly. Only brothers as close as Ron and I were can tease each other like that. And the second story is I, like most career people, I was not a car guy. My car had holes in the floor. My personal car had holes in the floor. Well, I had a Crown Victoria. I drove that. I didn't need a personal car. And then I met Ron Sharp and Glenn Walton. Glenn had this chassis, what was that sports car you had?
The sports car?
Yeah, the little sports car.
I didn't have, I had a MR2.
Yeah. Ron had a red Porsche. And here am I with this raggedy Ford. And Ron teasing me unmercifully about it. You know, you really, you're earning a little more money. You should be able to do that. So Pam was teasing me the last time we came up. I have a Mercedes-Benz 550, but I don't know how to drive it. And it has all these gadgets. And the reason I have to have it is Ron Sharp and my association with the state police. You guys are car guys. And corrections, we may not be the greatest car guys in the world. Ron Ron was my dear brother, and we spent a lot of quality time together, a lot of time talking, and I lived with him through his experiences, and I was with him in spirit while he was going through his trials, and it was great that we came together in the cabinet. And I just want to take a couple minutes to talk about, I've heard people talk about his character. It is about his moral compass and how he viewed and loved the Pennsylvania State Police, and how he's so very much a part of his identity. And this evening I was thinking about Ron's service. And thank you, Pam, for the service. And Ty, I cannot tell you how proud I was, and how it's burned indelibly in my consciousness when the Pennsylvania State Police showed up to honor their colonel. And when they marched in and saluted their colonel, the service stopped. And for this old warrior, the world stopped. And we honored my beloved brother. Thank you. Thank you.
You were right. That's right. I'm sorry.
Did anybody get that on tape? Yeah. I don't get that too often. I was right. I'm not going to tell you what I was right about, but I was right. Before this evening goes a little too long, I want to make sure that we hear from the family. Martin Sharp has agreed, we kind of drafted him, to make sure he came up and gave some remarks. After him is going to be Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Blackburn, and then I heard, oh, not for me. Okay, sorry.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I'd like to thank you all first for the launch of the Xerox. Oh, sorry, wrong audience. I've had about 15, 16 years with Xerox, and we've just launched 110 new products, but I'm not going. No, on a serious note, I'd really like to thank everyone for coming out this evening. The coming together of both the old and the new guardians of the Pennsylvania State Police to honor my father is truly humbling to myself and my family, and we thank you. I don't want to be targeted as the longest speaking person, so I'm going to briefly focus on 5 words that my father instilled in his children, and probably a lot of people he came in contact with. The 5 words are journey, recognition, education, friendship, and appreciation. And in order to understand the reasoning behind these words, journey is, I've got to kind of give a definition of them a little bit. Journey is defined as an act of traveling from one place to another. This can be done both physically or mentally. The mental journey began a long time ago when a lot of you made the decision to join the Pennsylvania State Police or become Pennsylvania State Troopers. We now need to continue the journey, as we've heard, moving forward into the future. And I feel that by defining the next 4 words will take us along a path and to do just that. The next word is recognition. It actually had 3 definitions when I looked at it. The first one, identification of a thing or a person from a previous encounter. The second was the acknowledgement of something's existence, validity, or legality. And the third was an appreciation or an acclaim for an achievement. We're here recognizing my father, Colonel Sharp, for being the first. The victory my father and Harold Goodman spearheaded against the embedded cultural bias of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. The fact that we are creating a scholarship in his name. The next word, if I can turn the page, is education. That's a big one in the Sharp household. My father knew this was the ultimate tool needed when attempting to face the challenges the world presents. He knew that everyone needed to be educated about the many battles that were fought both for and against equal opportunity and inherent racism. Educated about the struggle to create recruitment drives. Educated about the struggle, about the battles to allow these recruitment drives. Educated about the rights to allow visibility of the intelligent, proud, and unbiased black state trooper. There are many stories that, when shared, however embellished they may become, would provide exceptional tutelage with the individuals who have now picked up the baton to continue the dream established by my father. I would like to express a word of gratitude to all who fought strongly and won against many odds, mainly Colonel Bacher and those of you present. Thank you for your efforts in creating. That my father and his eating partner at the night, probably was Ben, had had enough. She attempted to end the eating session by telling them that the restaurant was closing. As you can imagine, she was quickly schooled on the definition of the phrase, all you can eat. And she was promptly ignored. Dinner continued. My sister's getting nervous because she doesn't want me to go off-piste. But I feel I have to tell you a very quick story about myself. I was very blessed to have the opportunity while working for Xerox to leave the USA and go work in South Africa and live in Johannesburg for 3 years on an assignment to change the largest distributor of Xerox in South Africa to alignment with Xerox's current strategy. So you can imagine when I arrived in South Africa with my new training and education around management skills and all of the things learned to be a Xerox ambassador, to only to be told by the still inherent racism company in South Africa that they weren't going to listen to me. They basically said to me, and I'm going to put the words quite nicely, 10 years ago we'd have buried your black out back. Who are you to come and tell us what to do? And my boss at the time said to me, how can you have the management of anger? Surely you were upset. You just wanted to grab this guy and shake him. What did you say? And I said to him, well, the first thing I said to this particular individual was, can I have your autograph? And he said, what do you mean, can I have your autograph? I said, because I've never met a real racist before. Can you sign this for me? I said, secondly, I'm going to leave now because I'm angry. And when you can speak to me with the respect that I've deserved, not like how you speak to your mother and anyone else in your family, then maybe we can have a conversation. And my boss said to me, yeah, but come on, Martin, I know you. You've got a temper. You can be angry. I said, look, when it comes to racism and discrimination, and they sent me here to South Africa, they sent the right person. Retribution, anger, and violence is not my DNA. My father did not bring me up that way. This brings me to my final word, appreciation. The entire Sharp family would like to say, thank you for your commitment to the journey, and let's get the 9, got to add that. Thank you for recognizing what was accomplished by my father and others, a lot of you here. Thank you for the commitment to educate those who don't fully understand what was achieved and the sacrifices that were made to provide what many enjoy today. Last but certainly not least, thank you to his friends. Without you, the dream would not be. Thank you.
He could have left the notes. I could use them for my next time I get up here, in case anyone ever wants to ask. One little story I want to share about Ron. He was the first black Pennsylvania State Trooper that got sent to Northwestern University's long course. That was back when it was 10 months. Guess who was number 2? But I didn't make Colonel. But really in my heart of hearts it wasn't there. But I wanted to, the reason I tossed that out is because there was someone who went to both the Traffic Institute's long course and broke around and became a person that went to the FBI National Academy. That man is the one I introduced to you next, Lieutenant Colonel Joe Blackburn.
Thank you. So much has been said about Colonel Sharp tonight. It's going to be very hard to add to it, but I do have some observations that I'd like to make. On the day that Colonel Blocker received that telephone call where Colonel Sharp promoted him to captain, I would think that right before he called him, he called me. And he promoted me to major because I was in the position that he went to. So if I would have said no, he probably wouldn't have got the call. So I said, well, that's great news, Colonel. I'm really happy. I'm really thankful. He said, oh, you didn't hear the rest of it yet. I said, well, what's that? He said, you're going to be my executive officer. I said, well, that's fine. That would be great. So I had the opportunity then to spend every single day with him for about 2 or 3 years. And you know, what a tremendous benefit that was to me. I mean, he had all the attributes that any commissioner, any leader would need. And I just absorbed. He had some personal traits that were exceptional. He was very patient. He was very kind. And he was, he continually asked for my input on different topics. But on the other hand, he was also very decisive. And if a decision had to be made, even if it was if that decision was going to be receive pushback from the rest of the organization, he still made that decision. Now, I'm going to go back in time a little bit now, and I'm going to tell you another story about how Colonel Sharp was a promise keeper. When I was in the internal affairs, I was a captain in internal affairs, director of internal affairs, and we had a different commissioner. His name was Colonel John Schaefer. And I had worked with him in the development of the new Bureau of Professional Responsibility. And Lieutenant Colonel Conley was also part of that, and there's others that are here tonight. And when I was very, very close to John Schaefer. And when John Schaefer developed a cancer, many of us know, a very rapidly developing cancer. And a few days before he died, I visited him at his home, and he said, Joe, what can I do for you? And I said, well, I would like to go to Troop J. And he said, okay, well, I'll transfer you to Troop J. I said, well, there's already a captain there. He said, well, okay, well, maybe I won't then. I said, please don't do that. I said, eventually, you know, maybe my wish to go to Troop J would be honored. So as time went on, Colonel Schaefer passed away. Colonel Sharp became commissioner. Lieutenant Colonel Walt became deputy commissioner. I got a call from Colonel Sharp to come over to his office. And I said, he said, I'm going to transfer you. That's like the worst words you want to ever hear. I'm going to transfer you. And I said, where? He said, I'm going to transfer you to Troop J. He said, because hours before a certain man died, I made a promise to him that when the opportunity presented itself, that he would transfer me to Troop J. And he remembered that, and he did that. But he was all through my time as executive officer, you couldn't find a calmer, more ethical, more decisive man. And I went on to have a fantastic career after that, and I owe all of that to him. Now, in closing, I'd just like to say that I had the opportunity to work directly for him and for Colonel Wall. And so I saw both of them every day of the week. And when I worked for Ron, I would walk into his office and my blood pressure was like way down below where it was to be for the national average. You know where this is going. And then when I worked for Colonel Wall, it elevated. My blood pressure elevated to way over where you're supposed to be in the national average. So, thank you very much for allowing me to be here tonight and just to share some of my observations. I owe an awful lot to Colonel Ronald M. Sharp. Thank you.
Wow, don't we all, really, when I stop and think about it. The last person I'm going to bring up is one that I would often say doesn't need an introduction, because I don't think you're in this room and not know who this man is. But I will say this about him. When I first got assigned to department headquarters, both he and Colonel Sharp made it their points to come walk to my little cubicle. Now, I'm just a little old lowly corporal in Bureau of Research and Development. And the colonel comes in and just sits down in my cubicle and just sits and chats, and I'm looking at him. If there had been a charcoal briquette in my derriere, I'd have a 5-carat diamond. Because, yes, he's a nice man, but that was the colonel coming to my cubicle. Now, in hindsight, I'll tell you why. But then a couple of days later, maybe a week or so later, then Major Brooks comes into my cubicle, sits down and starts to chat like we're old buds. Again, maybe not a 5-carat diamond, but a diamond nonetheless. But I look back on those times and I understand why they came to visit. They came to visit to let everybody and anybody know that while I'm sitting in a little cubicle, there are other eyes watching me. And not just watching what I do, watching what is done to me. It's nice to have, in Chicago they call it a rabbi or a godfather, someone who looks out for you in law enforcement. Ben Brooks was one of those men in my life, and that's the man I'm bringing up here now.
Ron, this is Ben. I told you that they would never recognize you until you died. And I want to tell you now, Ron, this is the biggest crowd ever for you. And they're here to help us celebrate you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Byron saved me to last, and I guess there's a reason for that. We have to get out of here soon. They know that I'm not a person of few words, but my grandfather said to me as a young boy, he said, you know, you're the talkingest young man I've ever seen. He says, as a matter of fact, you have enough mouth for another set of teeth, boy. But Ron was a very, very dear friend. Many of you really don't know the struggles. John White was in the hallway and he said, Ben, I hope I didn't offend anybody. I said, I don't care. You said what should have been said. Because this man touched so many lives, it was unbelievable. And yet, we have so many people who don't come out to show the appreciation. Bill Bolden's name was on the consent decree, and everybody says this the Bolden consent decree, but guess what, ladies and gentlemen? Had it not been for Ron Sharp, it would not have happened. Many of you don't know that Ron was one of the first official whistleblowers. When Harold called Ron didn't know Harold, and they started to talk, and Harold explained what he needed to do. And what Ron did, Ron got many, many copies of documents that needed to be gotten. Ron, at one point, was banned from personnel. He was assigned there. Ron was banned from the academy. He was banned from talking to the cadets at the academy. That's how powerful Ron was. You see, ladies and gentlemen, in life, you must understand that the amount of vitriol that's leveled against you is incommensurate with the amount of power that you possess. We fought a lot of battles. And folks said, look around and said, you know, we talk about where we are right now. McDowell and I were the first two African Americans to come on the job under the competitive examination. And right now, I am the oldest living black state trooper in Pennsylvania. And I must tell you, I'm still playing basketball too. But look at it with Ron. Ron became the first president of the Guardians. Because we realized that we had to do something to bring folks together because there was some issues. And the opposition towards Ron began when he was recognized as the president of the Guardians. I remember there was a meeting. We had a lady by the name of Christine Carter, who was the affirmative action officer. And she was running everything, and we wanted to have a meeting. Well, first of all, we had a meeting in Philadelphia. We decided in Philadelphia that we need to have a meeting with the commissioner, so we sent our request up, and all of a sudden, there were a number of people who went to meet with the commissioner, none of which was done in Ron. So they had a meeting, and they came back, and so in our little humble way, we said, oh no, that's not going to happen. So we called another meeting, because this was the official meeting. And we went to a second meeting, and in that meeting it was Randy Christie and a bunch of us. And before we got started, Randy stood up and said, look, ladies and gentlemen, that meeting you had before was bogus. These are the people who want to talk to you about what's really, really going on. Because the people at the first meeting, all they did was walk in there and vilified Ron. You know, he thinks he's such a bunch. You see, and that man touched all those people. He did things for those people, even though they were that much public against him. I became one of the first African Americans to be promoted to the rank of captain. And that was because of Ron. People don't understand this, you know, because why did they promote me? Ron had seniority, McDowell had seniority. They promoted me because they wanted to get back at Ron. But we talked. You see, even when we first came with a job, they would call, and it was hard. They always tried to divide and conquer, but we didn't go for it. So when Ron, we had to sit down, and Ron said, Ben, if it wasn't me, I'm glad it was you. And that's the kind of relationship that we had. And I remember I was a troop commander, and I was there for a few years, and when John Schaefer, who had worked for me, and John Schaefer and Ron were named commissioner and the deputy, Ron called me and he said, Ben, he said, look, we are going to bring you into Harrisburg to take over the affirmative action officer. And I said, Ron, I said, I don't think I'm ready to go right now. He said, it's not a multiple choice question. So I came in. And we worked it. And see, Ron was one of those people, you know, he was really a true friend. And they were talking about cars. Ron loved cars. And when he came with his, he had a Gran Turismo and a whole bunch of other cars. And so one day he bought this one car. I said, Ron, what did you get? He said, I bought myself a Mercedes. I said, what? A Mercedes? I said, you mean a Mercedes? He said, no, the Mercedes. I said, why do you call it a Mercedes? He said, Mercedes papers is killing me. But he was really, really a dear friend. When John was talking, there was so much more that John wanted to tell you. There was so much more vitriol that went into that whole selection of Ron. You see, Ron became a commissioner because he had to come in through the back door. You see, John Schaefer was a dear friend of mine. But in order for Ron to become in that position, they had to have a buffer of a white face before that could happen. And then when John passed away, then Ron ascended to that position. But a lot of folks don't understand or know that. I had the distinction of being one of the few people to swear in 3 commissioners: John Schaefer, Ron Sharp, Glenn Walt. Ty, I was waiting for you, but they didn't get the word. And the thing about Glenn and Ron, and Glenn, I couldn't think of a better person to be the keynote for Ron tonight than Glenn, because you see, what you don't understand, those guys worked hand in glove. You had a black commissioner and a white deputy. It reminded me of this old lady was on the train one day, and so she was on the train during the segregation days, and she was sitting there knitting and just humming little tunes to herself, and all of a sudden this white conductor came past, and she said, Mister, could I bother you for a second? She said, yeah. Could you tell me what time it is? And she said, well then, it's about 11:30. She said, thank you. And he walked on away. And he walked more than 10 steps, and this black conductor came by, and she said, pardon me, sir, she said, could I ask you a question? Could you tell me what time it is? And he said, ma'am, you know, it's 11:31. So the white guy comes back and he says, wait a minute, what's wrong? You asked me, and now you're going to ask him. Why are you asking him? She said, mister, I don't mean no harm. But my mama always told me, when someone tells you something, always get it in black and white. And Ron was a very generous person, and Ron had a sense of humor too, and he was